All right, well, welcome to Three Side Sports Talk. Appreciate you joining us again. We are recording shortly after the 49ers Buffalo game, which I think all three of us went into that game anywhere from mildly positive they were going to win to, pretty positive. But I'll say the word, I wasn't frustrated as so much as I was disappointed because we talked about things that, that happened. Like, okay, we need to move the ball. We need to do this. And all of a sudden, we can't cover anybody. Right. I mean, I'm a fan of Josh Allen, but he jumped from pretty likable guy to looking like a superstar, on that day. And for all the good things Jimmy Ward did in the Rams game, and they were talking about, what an influence he was, I had to go back and see how many snaps he played. Like, he was never called. And the defense, which is so funny that we kind of talked about that at the end of last podcast, is what let them down. I mean, Mullins turned the ball over, and that we kind of know that's going to happen. But I was disappointed, but what about you?
Well, let me ask you this. Does the name Corey Bojorquez mean anything to you? Anybody? Well, for those who don't keep track of the special teams depth charts, because, what else is there to do during shelter in place? Bojorquez is the Bills punter. And why am I bringing up the Bills punter? Not just because Bojorquez is a pretty fun name to pronounce, but the dude only punted once. Yeah. One time the entire freaking game. In the fourth quarter, no less.
Right.
So that pretty much tells you how the game went, right? Then you add in the fact that the Niners secondary, as you mentioned, allow Cole Beasley to run wild. Looked like Wes Welker in his prime.
Well,
yes, the same Cole Beasley who Jeff texted us before the game and claimed, Beasley, right. Ain't all that. Well, Mr. Ain't all that torched the Niners for $130 and a touchdown.
Yeah,
if Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch wanted to know what a real franchise quarterback looked like, as Todd said, they got a front row seat for one Mr. Josh Allen, right? I mean, I know that the Niners defense didn't provide much pressure, but dude, Allen looked superb. Yeah. Not only did he take advantage of every opportunity and was absolutely money. I mean, he was showing penalties, pointing out penalties to the refs before completing his passes. And I'm not sure when the Academy Awards nominations take place, but you can put down Allen for best acting in a sports drama, if that's even a category.
That was brutal.
Because that roughing the passer penalty on Contavious Street was made possible by Allen's Oscar-winning flop, which was a huge momentum shift, game changer.
Yeah.
So, while it didn't end up being the street ball version of Josh Allen that I thought would beat the Niners. Ultimately, the Niners still lost at the hands of, I guess, a much more polished version of Josh Allen, nonetheless.
Yep.
Yeah, and not watching a lot of Josh Allen necessarily. I don't necessarily tune in for Bills games. To me, he looked like Peyton Manning out there just carving up the defense. And never did Salah adjust. I kept waiting. Salah, adjust. In the soft zone, no pass rush. We know we don't have a pass rush. You could adjust something somewhere. Never came. And so then, of course, we started with the whole, come on, Salah, what's going on? And then the news of Richard Sherman beforehand. Maybe I won't sign here next year. Well, maybe we don't want you to sign here next year. Maybe we don't need you anymore. We'll just move along.
Yeah, this was reminiscent of the Niner defense 2 years ago when I was definitely not on the Robert Saleh is a great coordinator, could be a head coach bandwagon. Like, I thought he routinely got out-schemed because whether it was because he was too stubborn to make adjustments, but those corners playing soft zone off easily, not having deep safety help. I mean, Allen was good. But there were some passes that were just so wide open that every quarterback was going to be able to hit. And we knew without Bosa, our pass rush is going to be a little bit of a work in progress. He didn't bring that much pressure. He didn't do things that you would have thought we've got to do something for this guy. And that goes back to the frustrating part and puts me right back into, I don't mind if Saleh goes to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions. Yes, he has done well when he has good players.
Yes.
And I guess that goes hand in hand. Boy, you're a really good coach when you got good players, and you're not so good when you don't have good players. But I just think that I think other guys can do as well as Saleh. And with the number of possible head coaching options, that means coordinators are going to become available. I'm not gonna do much to prevent Saleh from taking the job anywhere if that's what he wants.
I mean, I hear the criticism as far as like the coaching is concerned. Personally, I'm not sure how much adjusting they did. I mean, I've heard during the post-game news conferences that, you know, they did try to switch up from zone to man or whatnot. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it ultimately comes down to talent. Or I should say ultimately, it starts with talent, right? I mean, I've been watching football longer than I can remember, and what's absolutely clear, especially in today's NFL, is that you need to have talent on both sides of the ball, obviously a smart coaching staff, you know, strong team leaders, good health, right? And a legit starting quarterback, a great one if you want to win the Super Bowl. So, I mean, I understand the critique or the criticism behind, you know, like Kyle or Saleh when they don't have the talent and they only can win with talent, but that's just how it is for all coaches.
No, I heard the criticism of Shanahan, and I'm like, absolutely not. He is putting people in position, like Mullins throwing picks, balls going off Ayuk's hands. Like, those things are not coaching issues. Now, if you want to say, and I heard this, you got to feed Mostert more, okay?
Yep.
If you want to say that, okay. But his philosophy from his dad is a running back is a nameless, faceless guy who he runs, you know, with. When you don't know who's running sometimes when it's Jeff Wilson and Mostert. So if you want to say Mostert needs a few more carries, I get that. But the people who are criticizing Shanahan clearly slept through the Jim Tomsula, Chip Kelly, Mike Nolan, Mike Singletary years, because those guys, they could not game plan anything. They couldn't game plan themselves out of a wet paper bag. And Shanahan, with a quarterback we all agree with, would not be a starter on any other team when everyone's healthy, is competitive. And the numbers don't look good. They're one game out of the playoffs. Now, can this team get there? I don't know. They needed to win Buffalo to give them a little bit of wiggle room. They almost have to win out, which means beating Arizona and Seattle. Tall task. So the numbers are there, but the criticism of Shanahan is mind-blowing to me.
Well, the only thing I mentioned about that is, and I'm not sure, I'm not saying get rid of Shanahan, but I believe I just looked it up, 28-32 is his record. So that's going to come up because that's just the bottom line, right? Like, is he putting enough wins together? But then that clearly goes back to talent. Do you have the talent? Do you have the quarterback? A lot of those years were marred by that. So I'm not saying get rid of Shanahan. I agree with you. Saleh, if he wants to move along, sure. You know, there's going to be other guys out there, other candidates. As far as the run game, I'm not sure what happened there. If Buffalo was just keying on the run, and because they didn't have the numbers for the run or the yardage, the carries, I'm not sure what happened there or why they weren't going to the run more. But yeah, I mean, Shanahan can't have Ayuk catch the ball or things like that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we saw what can happen last season, right? When everything comes together for the Niners under Shanahan. They got to the Super Bowl. So, you know, I don't really pay much mind to his critics. I mean, if anything, as I mentioned just a second ago, you can look at some of the top coaches in the league as prime examples of, you know, what happens when you don't have things come together. I mean, everybody loves Andy Reid right now, right? But he's had good teams with good quarterbacks in the past, but had never won until he got all-world quarterback Patrick Mahomes, right? And we're seeing what's happening with Bill Belichick, right, without Tom Brady. So, you know, to me, I think Kyle's one of the best in the league, who's on teams with the Niners have unfortunately been snake bit by injuries. And I think the reason why what we're seeing with the Niners run game, it's clear what teams are doing. I mean, I don't think they ran particularly well in the second half against the Rams. And as we saw, they didn't run as well or as much against the Bills. I think teams are either they're sort of figuring out what the Niners are doing, or maybe it's both, that they're figuring it out and they're just forcing the Niners' hand, right? They know, hey, look, you guys have Nick Mullins, and we're going to force you to use Nick Mullins to beat us.
We're going to force you to pass it, and then that pass goes to Jordan Reed, but it's not catchable, or it's out of bounds, or it's behind him.
Well, you saw the deep ball to Ayuk. Like that play, that was the one essential deep pass that they took. Ayuk
it wasn't even a good pass.
No, he was wide open and had to adjust to catch and stay. So no, it's no wonder teams are going, we're going to take our chances cheating linebackers up towards the line and playing safeties in the box, because we're more likely to get gashed for 4 and 5 yards a clip with their running backs. And we're going to take our chances letting, these receivers go one-on-one, knowing that Mullins isn't going to be able to hit them that often. And it took a great play by Ayuk to get that catch and get him into scoring position. So
I was surprised Mullins could get down the field that far. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. I think the sequence that really showed why Mullins is a backup and will probably forever be a backup was when they were on the half-yard line. All he had to do was sneak it in, yet he false starts on himself.
On himself, yeah.
And then throws a pick in the ensuing play.
Yeah. So, I don't think I think everyone is kind of on the same page in terms of what happened with Buffalo. I think it was not surprised. If you said Buffalo won that game beforehand, I don't think anyone was going to be shocked. If you said, Josh Allen had a good game, well, I don't think tons of people would have been shocked because he's a good quarterback. But I think it was just the way that the defense played and the way they got picked apart was troublesome. And that leads to this next game against Washington. You're playing a team who just beat the Steelers somehow. Not sure how that worked out. But you're going up against another strength, which is their defensive line. And that's going to be a game where Mullins he's just got to do enough to move the ball. How many times did they go 3 and out? How many times it was like run for 3, run for 4, it's 3rd and 3, and off Jordan Reed's hands or something. And they're going to have to do something with Mullins to move the ball and get put together consecutive first downs, because Washington's defense, don't look now, but the Washington football team has just won 3 in a row, and got a strong defensive line and has a quarterback that we all know will do just enough at times to move the ball, and it's frustrating because it is a roller coaster, hoping that, they put things together. So, we'll see.
The NFC East has gone from least to beast in a short amount of time, at least the teams at the top of the division, right? You wouldn't think of it because of their overall losing record, but as you said, Washington's won their last 3 games, and usually that means they're primed for a letdown. However,
so positive of you.
Well, but Washington does have a realistic chance to win the division, shockingly, whereas the Niners, while mathematically still in the playoff hunt, they'd have to win out, and that's just not realistic, in my opinion. Plus, they've been away from home for 2 straight weeks now, and after getting thumped by the Bills, I'm just not sure how much juice is left in the tank. So if Alex Smith's leg doesn't fall off, and if Washington's defense continues to wreak havoc, which, you say that you were hoping that Nick Mullins can do something, it's their pass defense, and that pass rush is what is their strength. So I just don't see it.
Yeah. One of the things I worry about now is that now that they lost that game of the Bills, they're still stuck in the hotel on the road. Is that going to start to play into their mind, or how motivated are they going to be? They still have a chance, so we'll see. But then if they lose this game, then I can just see it, just the wheels falling off, and no motivation to play any harder. Really.
Can you believe that even after Nolan and Singletary wasted the first 6 years of Alex Smith's career, that his record as a starter is 97-67?
Yeah.
Talk about comeback player of not just the year, but how about of the decade?
Yeah, I mean
$2,000s.
it's hard not to root for Alex Smith. I mean, if you don't root for Alex Smith, I don't think we can be friends. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, there's just nothing not. I mean, unless he's going against your team and you're rooting against him for your team, but you cannot root against that guy.
What a story that, I mean, just with the I'm sure you guys watched that, right?
He almost had to have his leg amputated.
I mean, just so bad.
Well, I didn't see it, but supposedly he was bleeding. Like that leg was bleeding through the sock or something.
No, it was the other.
And that's just unbelievable.
It was the other leg because he got spiked. He got stepped.
That was the other leg.
Yeah. So, but talking about like what, like, boy, we had such a different perspective going into the Buffalo game because you saw like, oh, you win. What a difference a week makes, and like you said, boy, it was kind of like, boy, let's bring Sherman back. He's playing well. He got that interception. He's a good leader. But if you look at that play where basically he got beat, into the right corner when the guy was wide open, he did the exact same thing in the Rams game, except he stepped up and he jumped the route and picked off Goff. Allen looked at that way. Sherman looked like he was going to jump it, and then he threw it right over the top. I mean, that was the maturation of Josh Allen right there, showing he can be a legit quarterback, and it kind of showed what Sherman's weakness is. Like, he's always played on that, I'm going to try and be smarter than you and jump those routes. And when he was in Seattle and he had Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor to back him up on the back end of that defense, it allowed him a little bit more freedom, which is why he got so many picks. Without, those safety blankets back there, Sherman is a zone cover. Now, I will say, Jeff brought it up on the podcast last week. I think it was, maybe it was Jerry. Which one of you said maybe they'll move Sherman to safety? Because
I can't remember. I think I might have mentioned that if they bring him back.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that'd be a good move, but yeah.
Because he played safety for a couple snaps in the Rams game and a few snaps in the Buffalo game. Now, it was basically keeping him on the field while going with another linebacker, but the idea of you're putting him out there, it does lend a little bit of credence to at least that's something they might be looking for in terms of, well, we're not going to be able to, keep him as a shutdown corner, but could he be useful? So just something to keep an eye on as.
It's not so much that he's not Richard Sherman anymore, but are you willing to pay an now off injured guy top dollar for corner? I'm not sure I am. If you can get him cheaper for safety, maybe, but.
Right. Well, and you got to keep this game in mind and kind of this whole season in mind. In a couple years, when Bosa's contract comes up and we're questioning, do you pay this guy? Without a pass rush, right, it's a completely different game. And if it means he's playing 66% of the games or 70% of the snap, whatever it might be, I think that impact is worth it because he could wreck a game. And seeing what our defense did, just rushing those four and not being able to contain and not being able to run down Josh Allen, and it speaks to you're gonna have to pay the guy. And it's funny to say that as he's missed the entire season almost, but that's how important a pass rusher and a young pass rusher.
Whether it's him or somebody else that they find, though.
Yeah, but it's always hard, to say, go get. I mean, it's what kills me when you say, just draft one. Well, everyone tries to draft this and that. It doesn't work all the time. And it was, interesting to hear that Juszczyk's already started to have preliminary negotiations, with the front office. So
that's good.
That's a conversation. It's unfortunate it's on the same day that you hear Debo didn't practice today because he's got a foot contusion, but it's this season has been almost one step forward, one step back, and you're kind of stuck in neutral.
It's just so 2020. That's what the season's like, which, coming off the Super Bowl loss and everything that's happened.
That kind of started 2020 right there. That kind of started 2020.
Well, exactly.
Kind of, but I mean, look back at some of these past years. Even last year, I'm not sure we were on IR numbers. It was pretty high, but we got through it.
Well, that's the thing, right? Last season, it wasn't like it was a cakewalk either as far as the injuries.
A lot of injuries last year.
Yeah. Only guy who didn't get injured last year of all players was Jimmy.
Right. Look what happens when you have a quarterback. I just wanted to quickly step away from the Niners, because if you guys watch any other games, I'm sure you see the Raiders and the Jets do such Jets things, right? But you saw Carr, and that last pass, he stepped up and he threw it pretty effortlessly, and he dropped it in the bucket, like they like to say, and not that he had a great game, but you start seeing these quarterbacks and you're like, that's, you made a play. He made a play. Now, granted, if, the counter to that is, why are you in a competitive game with the New York Jets, considering how terrible they are,
but make a play.
But make a play.
Pass for Jimmy.
I am the I'm the card-carrying president of the I don't like Baker Mayfield as a quarterback fan club, right? But you can't deny when you're watching him that he made plays, and he hit a couple deep throws, and he had a great play action, play down near the goal line. And you just start looking at those things, and you're like, he wasn't that guy. Now he's evolved. I still don't think he's a Super Bowl quality quarterback. I still think he's going to be the reason that the Browns implode at some point, whether it's late in the season to get into the playoffs or in a playoff game on the road. I still think he's the weak link.
Well, like I said before, you have to have talent, but you also have, smart coaching. And I think as far as the Browns are concerned, it definitely seems like Kevin Stefanski was the right hire. And he's got that program right on track, particularly with Baker Mayfield and using him the way that he should be used, right? I think they do a lot more play action and whatnot. But as far as like quarterbacks, you want that good quarterback. But it's funny you mentioned that, because what I was thinking after the Bills game was, what if Jimmy were healthy and playing against the Bills? Would he have made a difference in the outcome? And honestly, I don't think so, because the Niners couldn't run the ball consistently, as we mentioned, and the defense was just awful. And those were the two biggest components to last year's team, which helped Jimmy be as successful as he was. So if anything, this game to me was a cold splash of reality that showed how many holes this team has overall, holes that will need to be addressed through the draft as well as free agency, not only in terms of resigning our own key guys, but also going out into the open market and signing an impact player or two, such as another pass rusher. If I may borrow a slogan or a mantra from another championship caliber team in the Bay, it's about strength in numbers. So, I know it's difficult for some to consider moving on from Jimmy. He's well-liked, highly respected, but when he's on the field, sometimes he leaves you scratching your head. And then how often is he on the field?
Yeah.
And if they trade Garoppolo, that's $24 million more they'll have available on their salary cap, plus the draft pick they can get for Jimmy.
Yeah. But again, then who do you replace him with? Then you have to trade for somebody else's guy, Stafford or Ryan, and then we got to pay that salary. So
I'm glad you brought that up.
Right.
So last week, we talked about Ryan Fitzmagic as a possible replacement for Jimmy and how much of a drop-off that would be. And I think we concluded that if we can get him, you probably get him in that $8 to $10 million price range, and it wouldn't be that big of a drop-off. So this week, I got another player for you to consider. Okay, so this quarterback was taken atop the draft not too long ago, has shown flashes of brilliance, has even won a playoff game, and has a Heisman Trophy to his name. No, not Tim Tebow. Sorry, Jeff. I know you had your hopes up. But the player who I'm referring to is Marcus Mariota. So Mariota, I don't know if you guys know, signed a 2-year deal this past offseason with the Raiders to be Derek Carr's backup.
And then got hurt.
Well, okay, so we'll get to that. But hold on. So Derek, right? But Derek's having a solid year, right? And the Raiders aren't going to keep Mariota as the highest paid backup who would be making $10 million next season, right? So they'll cut him for sure. And I think Marcus will be refreshed and refocused, having taken this season to recover physically and mentally, right, from the beatings that he took in Tennessee. So yes, perhaps he started the season banged up. Perhaps some of it's still lingering from his time in Tennessee. But I just think that having a place like, like the Niners with Kyle would be a good landing spot for him. I mean, can you like, first of all, I would equate a lot of similarities between Mariota and Alex Smith, right? Both are talented, they're athletic, they're great leaders, but their development was stunted by terrible coaches and the lack of continuity. Did you know that in his 5 seasons with Tennessee, he had 5 offensive coordinators? Can you name them?
Absolutely not. But I mean, but you're right. It sounds like the first chapter of the Alex Smith autobiography of why is he playing this long? It's because he does have the talent, the athleticism, the chutzpah, if you will, just to, how many people were telling him, Alex, just hang it up. You've made your money. You can go sit and live in an island in Hawaii for the rest of your life and not have to worry. Yet you're coming back to be a backup on Washington. Not even you were third string, for those first few games. And I agree. Those first years of the rotating offensive coordinator when you're a young quarterback is extremely detrimental. And I mean, I do not like agreeing with Jerry in most things, but Mariota is a guy he's actually one of the first guys that I've heard as a legitimate option in terms of it doesn't cost anything to get him because the Raiders can get out of his contract for nothing. He has 0 dead cap space next year. So you can essentially sign him. You can sign him for $8 to $10 million, which is what he made this year with the idea that he's coming to Kyle's offense. And then if you do move on from Jimmy, you have an extra $10 to $14 million to play with in free agency, which means you can go out and re-sign Trent Williams or use check or, extend Fred Warner now or whatever it is. So
I remember what happened with Alex the moment he hooked up with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, right? That's when his career took off. So I could see a similarity with Mariota hooking up with Shanahan and one of the offensive coordinators that he had in Tennessee, Matt LaFleur. So he should have familiarity with the Shanahan, scheme.
Yeah, I would say that unfortunately, a lot of these guys go through bad coaches and many offensive coordinators, and we never really know what their full potential could have been. It's really kind of sad, really. Which is why I want to see Trevor Lawrence not go to the Jets. I just want to see that for the drama. But we can talk about that some other time. Right. But Mariota, I mean, sure. I think you have to keep the option open for everybody. Mm-hmm. But which brings me, every time you say that, I keep thinking to myself, I know you love Shanahan. We all love Shanahan. Is he developing these quarterbacks, or is he able to develop these quarterbacks? Matt Ryan was a good quarterback. I don't know the answer.
I don't know if he can develop quarterbacks, but everywhere he's gone and had a talented quarterback, he's been very successful.
Yes.
So his scheme is smart quarterback friendly.
I just don't know when we talk about this stuff, is he the quarterback whisperer guy, or is he just, I have a good quarterback and I'm going to scheme around it?
So, I mean, I look at this. For Robert Griffin Jr. III, when was his best years? Under Shanahan. Right. Granted, they ran him in the ground, but still with the Shanahans.
Right.
When was Brian Hoyer's best year? Okay, excluding the Niners, when they were in Cleveland, right? With Shanahan.
Matt Ryan,
MVP with the Falcons, right? So, I think that Kyle knows how to get the most out of these guys. Matt Schaub, when they were in Houston, right? And something that I've also heard, I don't know if you guys have heard, is that Kyle's had to hold his scheme back because of Jimmy. Like that Jimmy, because of some of Jimmy's limitations, has held his, like he can't unleash his full playbook. So, again, to me, that's just another reason why.
It's still a thing, but in the beginning when he didn't know the full playbook, I heard that. I don't know if that's still a thing or not, but yeah, I think, but then it goes back to what we were talking about last week. Is he willing to move on from these other backups? Because potentially you could have 3-4 new quarterbacks next year, and maybe they should.
I think we should. I personally think we should have an entirely new quarterback room. I mean, if you can bring back Mullins as maybe the third guy, the guy who completely knows the system, great. But I know he's going to be a restricted free agent. I'm not entirely sure how that works. I know that last season when Breida became a restricted free agent, we put a second-round tender on him or something. His salary skyrocketed to $3 million. I'm not paying $3 million for Nick Mullins as a backup.
Correct.
Yeah, so Mullins will be a restricted free agent, which essentially means the Niners can match anything that he's offered. I don't know if a team's going to – I mean, if what we're saying over the past few weeks is true, that Matt Ryan might be available, that Matt Stafford might be available, that Sam Darnold might be available, that you got Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and the kid from BYU, and, if you got all these guys coming into the league, is there really room for a Nick Mullins as your starting quarterback? Like, I don't see a team going out there to spend the big bucks. So
it seems like if they move on from Jimmy, then you just, whether or not you keep Mullins as your third, Beathard's got to go too. You go get one of these other guys you're talking about, whether it's Mariota, draft a guy, combination thereof, trade for somebody else. But I mean, like you're saying, if we can't unleash the full potential of the offense, then you need to just totally go in a different direction. Otherwise, we're wasting time, and his record is going to go from 28-32 to 30-50 by the time we're done here.
So
another name that nobody's talked about, but would be a good fit as a backup, Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, there's another guy who has been since forgotten, who has NFL starts under his belt, who isn't like even coming out of Washington State. I mean, he's your try hard, he comes out of the Jeff Garcia mold. Like he's not going to look good at the combine, in the physical measurables. He just gets out there and pulls out wins. Now I'm not saying he's going to do that all the time, but that's another name that's going to be out there.
But he'd be the perfect backup, right? He's your scrappy gamer. What he lacks in physical measurements, he makes up for with moxie. I mean, he showed promise his rookie year, mobile, accurate. And most importantly, he makes the minimum, and the Jags will be drafting a franchise quarterback with their first-round pick. So the new regime will most likely dump Minshew for nothing, right?
Next time as a backup, who's your starter in that scenario?
Mariota and Minshew mania in the Bay, baby. Let's go.
Oh, okay.
All right. I think now you're getting way ahead of yourself. I mean, it's going to have to be talked about, but scale that back.
Have John call me.
What I'm saying is you're sounding like we're talking about all these guys for backups. Who's our franchise quarterback of the future?
No, Mariota. Mariota is the guy that you groom. The guy's already had, he's had a foot in the door. He dipped his toe in the water. He knows what the league's about, right? Did you know that Mariota actually didn't even start playing, or he wasn't a starter for his high school team till he was a senior, right? So here's a guy who, in my opinion, was still really green when he came into the league. And when he was at Oregon, what did he do as far as the offense was concerned? This is what he did. He looked to the sideline. Okay, I'll run that play, right? So, I mean, to me, it was a huge learning curve. He had to rely on just get by on his athleticism. He got beat up a ton. Obviously, he got injured. So
that's a possibility. I just don't love his throwing motion. So that's all I'll say about that.
You could do worse than a guy who was thought highly enough of to win the Heisman Trophy and be the second pick in the draft and who's still 27 years old. So you can do worse. But before we now let's scale that back a little bit. Now, what are your expectations for the Washington game? What are your thoughts with what we've seen after Buffalo, with the Niners going into Washington? Because it's my contention that this is while you can go 3-1 and hope for coin flips of tiebreakers, you have to go 4-0 to get your record to 9-7 to get into the playoffs. So that's going to mean beating Arizona and beating Seattle. But thoughts on Washington?
Well, I don't want to change my course of thought from last week. So, I still think we're a better team than Washington. We got to score points. Our defense can let up whatever they let up, but we still, barely scored this week as well, right? We didn't touch on that too much. It was more the defense, but we need to score touchdowns. I still think we're a better team than the Washington football team, right? So I still think they have a chance, but it just depends on where their mind is and what's going on at the hotel, and if they still believe they're in it. I can still see them pulling that out.
I think Washington's defense will be too much for Nick Mullins. I think Alex Smith, with some of the weapons he has, with McLaurin, with the former quarterback, now tight end Logan Thomas. I think they're it's going to be a low scoring game. I don't think they're going that Washington's going to go off, but I think Washington wins this one.
They just don't really impress me. That's why I was surprised, like Todd said, they beat the Steelers. I'm not sure where they even came from or how that even happened. Next thing I look up and they're up by 3 or whatever.
Well, it came by virtue of their defense. They put some pressure on Roethlisberger. They got a couple tip balls. They got the pick, and Alex did just enough, including hitting 2 medium to deep passes, 1 to Logan Thomas to, score enough points. It was a low scoring game. More so than Washington, Pittsburgh was disappointing to watch, for being an undefeated, 11-0 team or whatever. But Washington, they played to their strengths, ball control, defense, didn't ask Alex to do too much, and it worked, But again, 3 games in a row now? It
almost seems like this is
the Giants in Seattle. Like the NFC East just forgot the season started in November, and they're starting to just play well in cold weather, I guess.
I wouldn't be surprised if they lost, but I just think that, with Captain Checkdown, I hate to see him and beat us. But
well, we have no pass rush, and Tavares Moore enjoys covering nobody in space rather than actually covering a receiver. So,
but is that him or is that the defense they're playing?
I don't know, but there were just way too many wide open receivers in
Saleh
the Bills
can
game.
Blitz. I don't know if he knows that. He can blitz once in a while. Not at the end of the game.
He's got to count 7 alligators before you do that. So, but yeah.
But if you blitz, you gotta hit it. You gotta nail it. Otherwise, the secondary's toast.
Yes, but I think Jimmy Ward and Verrett, maybe not Sherman as much, but they can cover these guys 1-on-1. This isn't the Chiefs.
Hey, and unless Cole Beasley gets traded to the Redskins, we should be able to contain, some.
It's all right. He ain't all that.
Is that Cole Beasley's best game of the year? Had to have been, right?
I don't
possibly know. In his career.
I don't know,
right.
but
which is not all that.
Jack, no more comments about any players going into that game about who you, in fact, I want you to say everyone is incredible. Everyone's awesome.
But here's the thing, right? So a lot of people were wondering why Deebo Samuel wasn't more heavily involved early on in the game on Monday night as well. And as you mentioned, he's got a foot issue, and maybe because of the heavy workload he had just coming off the IR against the Rams, I think they were just perhaps taking it easy. Maybe he's not 100%. I think one of the reasons why Tevin Coleman got stuffed on that one run was because they had Brandon Ayuk coming across trying to make that block or chip that one defender, and he just did not do a good job. And if there was Deebo there, probably could have made that block, probably could have got that first down. So yeah, I think that's an issue as well. If Deebo is not healthy, that's just another blow to the Niners' chances.
He did get 9 targets in the game. It's not that he didn't see the ball. I think more so it was they could not string together first downs. They just couldn't do it. Like, they get the ball to Debo, get a first down, and next thing you know, there'd be a penalty or this or that, and it was just that there was no continuity on that offense. So I think that, again, and I think that's part of the quarterback's job. I think the quarterback, there's some of that relies on the quarterback when you're talking about running tempo, getting organized. I mean, you're calling out people like, hey, we're running to your side. Like, you got to dig in against this guy. Like, let's go. So
yeah, I think we're capable of winning, but can Mullins make a play or two? But I can see us losing for sure. And then from then, I don't even know anymore, right? If that happens.
Yeah, I would be more surprised if they lost this game, just because, I mean, this is a mostly veteran team who should have some pride. I mean, I certainly don't think Kyle's out there going to do anything less than continue to call plays and put people in position. And I do think top to bottom the Niners are more talented. But they have to play, they have to
top to bottom, but we don't have our top. Do you see who's sitting in the stands during the game on Monday?
Very high-priced cheerleaders.
You had Kittle. You had Bosa.
Yeah.
You had Trent Taylor, for crying out loud.
And I was like, where's Trent Taylor? A healthy scratch?
Yeah. When you're a healthy scratch, you're starting to get into Dante Pettis territory. So
was he a healthy scratch?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I saw Craycraft out there a couple plays.
Yeah.
So I figured, I thought something had to be wrong. I didn't know. Okay.
I mean, it would have been a good guess that Trent Taylor is hurt again, but he wasn't. He was. They looked at him.
Well, obviously, Shanahan saw what I saw in his lack of punt returns. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's part. I think Kyle is such a football savant in terms of being around it his whole life and just diving headfirst into everything he does, that when guys aren't looking like they're giving everything mentally and, understanding what he's trying to do, I just don't think he has any time for that, which is why you get the Dante Pettis healthy scratches all year and then cut. That's why if you're Trent Taylor and you're dropping your muffin punts and you're not catching, but like, I don't think, which is great as a head coach that he has that. You didn't do your job, I got to find someone who can.
Right. Maybe he just knew that, Corey Bajorquez was only going to punt once in that game. So they didn't need Trent Taylor.
Right. So, all right. Well, hey, we're pushing our time limit. But again, great discussion. Really enjoyed it. I really look forward to these, these podcasts just from the standpoint of, like the title says, it comes from all different directions. And I think that as we start, narrowing down and the number of games dwindles, we're going to, have to start making some, rash decisions as fans as to what's next for this team. For the time being, go out and beat Washington
right.
make us feel better that you can beat those types of teams. And then, hey, one game at a time and we'll see. But, in the meantime, don't get hurt, stay healthy, don't do anything stupid, so those types of things. But anyways, hey, thanks guys. That was great. I appreciate it. So final words.
Mariota and Minshew in the Bay, baby.
All right. Well, we're going to have those T-shirts put into production.
I don't know. This is a very, my own last words are it's going to be a very important offseason / draft to see what the heck we're doing now.
Very nice. All right, guys. Well, that's it for Three Sides Sports Talk. We appreciate you downloading and listening. We look forward to doing it again next week.